Well, ladies and gentlemen, another day in Retardanistan, so let's consider the retarded news. But before we get on to the main video of today, can I just again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. As you know, it really does help. And if you want to support the work that I do here, please buy me a coffee. The link is in the description box below. I mean, check the bags under the R's. I'm quite tired. I could really do with that coffee. Reading news is exhausting, so let's go through it. Well, the first news article is really around the G20. Yes, that whole thing is still ongoing because Ramaphosa says that he's being lampooned globally after South Africa was excluded from the 2026 G20 summit in Miami, US. Now, according to the government, they're going to take a one-year break, like a sabbatical, because they were actually excluded, but now they're going to take a holiday instead. He claims that South Africa is being punished for pushing climate justice too hard. Well, yes, climate justice. The green agenda, green on the outside, red on the inside. You know the one. Anyway, he joked with Parliament that apparently the Climate Commission is to blame because he did such a good job on it. In fact, the job was too good and now he's being excluded. He says that South Africa has still had no formal written communication from Washington about its exclusion. They'd only really heard about it in the media, well, same as the rest of us. Now, he frames the South African position as a demand to be treated as an equal sovereign state. Now, the ANC has had mixed reactions. So, Mbalula says that the US allegations about South Africa are fake news, and the G20 stance shows a rising global South power. So that's the reason they've been excluded, because Trump's scared of them. I don't know. The Good Party called the US move a bully tactic and says that South Africa must maintain close ties because Trump will pass. So they're saying still be friends with the US, but Trump will be gone one day and we can negotiate with the next guy. And I suppose there is a degree of truth in that. Now, the DA says that the G20 snub is proof that South Africa's economy, foreign policy and BEE framework have collapsed investor confidence. Now, Julius Malema, well, he had the best response, and we must be honest and say it did make me chuckle, specifically because it's Julius, and when you hear what he had to say, you're like, pot calling the kettle, or In any case, he called Donald Trump the reincarnation of Hitler, coming from Juju. Well, who knew? And he called him a fascist with a gun to your head, says Julius Malema. It's like pot calling that, yeah, you get it. Anyway, he says that the US disinformation about SA is reaching Iraq/Afghanistan's pre-war levels. Yeah, except no one wants to invade South Africa because there's nothing to invade. Anyway, he accuses the BRICS allies of abandoning South Africa, asking whether BRICS is dead. We'll actually get on to BRICS in a minute because maybe it is. In any case, he frames the G20's exclusion as part of a global imperialist agenda against Africa. Always imperialist agendas whenever these individuals hear things that they don't like. Now, turning then to BRICS, well, something curious happened at the weekend because South Africa actually broke ranks with BRICS by voting for a UN resolution demanding Russia return abdicated Ukrainian children. Now, this in itself was kind of new because, as you know, we're always abstaining against anything that may be deemed to be critical of Russia. Now, Russia voted against this bill. China, India, Brazil abstained, and South Africa is the only BRICS member that actually voted in favor of it. Now, Pretoria says that the vote is about international law and protection of children and not about geopolitics. Well, we could also then look at South Africa's other favorite ally, also in the guise of the Palestinians. Well, as you know, the Palestinians were arriving on planes to South Africa underneath the 90-day visa exemptions. And this raised many individuals to ask the logical question of who the hell is sending them here and who's paying for it. Well, Home Affairs have now cancelled the 90 days visa exemption for Palestinians, suggesting that the exemption was being systematically abused through chartered flights allegedly linked to an Israeli intermediary which was encouraging Gazans to immigrate. Now, passengers had arrived with dollars, no luggage and no onward plans. And if you've watched my videos on this, you'll know all about it. Now, South Africa is saying that it will not be complicit in displacing Palestinians, but will still process asylum and visa applications. It's important to remember that the reason the last plane load of Palestinians here was so important is none of them wanted to apply for asylum in South Africa. In fact, many of them got very hysterical when they heard that South Africa was their last port of call, with the majority of them saying they want to go to Indonesia, not here, and, we all know why. But in any case, South Africa still continues to buy its friends in the form of foreign aid spending. So despite there being domestic crises in South Africa, with numerous individuals dying from HIV, lack of funding in the medical sector, and high unemployment rates, well, South Africa still sends hundreds of millions of rand abroad via its African Renaissance Fund. And this has been quite interesting to note because the latest figures have been released, with 140 million being given to Cuba, 50 million being given to Palestine, 41 million to Zimbabwe, 70 million to South Sudan, and over 100 million towards COVID vaccines across Africa. Yeah, I mean, we had to ask for COVID vaccines ourselves, but don't worry, we paid for others. All this whilst our own domestic fiscal instability occurs and gets weaker by the day. Now, talking of something weakening in the state, let's look at the SANDF. Because according to the latest news, only 27% of the SANDF soldiers are medically fit for deployment. 36% of soldiers have unknown health status due to failure to enforce medical checks, so they may all be not in the best of shape, and there are some disease categories, including HIV, that are considered too sensitive even to be auditors. You could have a load of soldiers with HIV and no one would know because, you can't ask them. I mean, that would be offensive. In any case, as you know, many of the military bases have broken fences, non-functional biometrics, and are missing ammunition containers. Yes, you and me, we're the problem in the state. This gun-free South Africa, that Nazi organization, the state has lost ammunition containers. Yeah, I wonder where they all went. Oh, I've noticed a lot of R5s are used in cash and transit heists. Aren't the R5 like a military weapon? In any case, it was news to me that civilians do actually wander into firing ranges with fatalities on army bases because they don't even know it's an army base. Yeah, that's pretty bad. Now, talking of problems, the PRC loaned 330 million to Lanceria's BE partner in 2013. Now, they structured a BE deal, and the idea was that the PRC would recover money via dividends, and the partners defaulted. These BE deals is what a waste of cash. In any case, the PRC has now seized shares. The new valuation showed that their stake is now worth 1 billion rand. And after offsetting the money that they said they owed, the PRC has been ordered to pay the partner 411 million rand. Now, the PRC has dropped their legal action, saying that it might have actually dropped the ball. In other words, they expropriated shares when they shouldn't have. They took money they shouldn't have, and now they owe them money. Yeah, now it's important to understand the reason this is also important is that the PRC actually manages the public pension money. So that's public pension money that's been lost through this BE structured deal and the government's, should we say it's eagerness to get on and expropriate stuff. You couldn't make this stuff up. But you know who definitely isn't getting paid yet again? Well, the ANC, because the ANC is yet again cash strapped, and the ANC has failed to pay ANC salaries a fifth time this year. Now, had this been any private entity, they probably would have got shut down by now by the unions, but we'll get onto the unions in a second. Now, the provinces have all been ordered by the ANC to fund the National General Council themselves. Now, the sheriffs have seized office furniture due to unpaid debts, and staff are now threatening to boycott the NGC, that's the National General Council. But you see, the problem is that this keeps happening inside the ANC. Now, you would say that in a normal functioning democracy, the leader who is responsible for all of this would be removed or would resign. And would you know it, that's actually been discussed of recent. And if you've been watching my videos, you will recall from last week that the removal of Cyril was very much on the cards. But then the ANC later quashed the whole suggestion that this was going to occur. Now, the ANC says that they have launched a probe into the alleged plot to remove Ramaphosa, and 2 demoted ex-ministers have been named by the media, and they both denying everything and demand the investigation proceed. The Eastern Cape Premier says that the story is manipulation meant to destabilize the party. I mean, to be frank with you, you don't need these type of stories to destabilize the party. The ANC just doing business as usual is pretty much enough to do it. Now, the ANC leadership insists that Ramaphosa is not going anywhere despite internal pressure. And Mbalula has said, "What succession? Leadership change is not up for debate until 2027. But you see, the reality is that leadership bids do start well in advance in Mbalula. And you and I both know that, which is why it has started to become a question. The other problem is that there is no one in the ANC who is an alternative, viable alternative to Cyril. And they know it, which is why they have started to discuss it. Discussion documents are warning that unmanaged succession could trigger a deeper crisis in the ANC. Well, would you know it, coming then to the unions, COSATU says that they will still shield the ANC. At the 40th anniversary rally, COSATU declared that the ANC, SACP and the COSATU alliance was sacrosanct. And they basically said that they needed to all stay together for the health of the Republic. And all I'm going to say is no, the ANC needs to die for the health of the Republic. Now, Ramaphosa thanked the unions for helping advance the National Democratic Revolution, the NDR. Yes, that's socialist communist bull rubbish. Now, COSATU simultaneously condemned the US global power, supported Palestine, Zimbabwe and Venezuela, and then they wonder why Trump says terrible things are occurring in South Africa and the South African government is not an ally of the US. I mean, these people just zero brains. Now, you would think that the ANC, with the suggestions that don't worry, guy, they will reform, things will get better. Well, that's a lie too, because in Joburg, they admit structural decline. They say that actually the ANC in Joburg is collapsing structurally, and this isn't temporary. They say that there is massive voter defections to the EFF, the PA, the MK, and the DA, especially in the stronghold, the traditionally ANC stronghold of Soweto. Now, the reasons listed by the ANC include service delivery collapse, electricity outages, water failures, billing disasters, and housing delays. They've also highlighted coalition chaos since 2016 with revolving mayors and the organizational decay with branches existing only on paper and recruitment spikes only occurring during conferences, and a warning of paid membership schemes controlled by factional funders, because this is the type of thing that Jacob Zuma put in place. You could get yourself elected if you just owned a huge big scheme, a membership scheme that you paid for all the members. The members don't really exist, and they amazingly all vote for you. Now, the ANC has had a massive, huge brain fart, and they thought to themselves, you know what we should do? We should reform ourselves and be cleaner than white. Well, not so fast, because over the weekend, an individual was elected to the Johannesburg regional chair, and this person has been linked to a 125 million PPP scandal. Now, her election was widely seen as strengthening Paul Mashatile's 2027 succession network, with all the individuals in that branch going absolutely nutty for her election. In fact, have a watch. Now, this new regional chair dismissed Helen Zilla's mayoral candidacy, saying that Joburg cannot be led by someone like her. Imagine using those words about this individual. You'd go, Do you mean like her because she's black? And then it would be a whole racial story. But it's amazing that nobody made this a racial story about Helen. So what do we mean by like her? Do you mean a Jew because she's a Jew? Do you mean a white person because she's white? Do you mean a liberal because she's a liberal? Or do you mean somebody who's not linked to a 125 million PPP scandal? Yeah, it could be that she's not actually a corruption accused, so Joburg cannot be led by her. You can let me know what you think of that in the comment section. Now, whilst there's these individuals in the ANC getting elected left, right and centre who have all been centre-pointing corruption scandals, the moron known as the health minister, Minister Moron, seems to continue to want to push ahead with a plan to fund the NHI by scrapping medical aid tax credits worth 33 billion a year. Now, his intention is to redirect these benefits from middle-class taxpayers towards poorer households. Well, the usual communist nonsense. Now, the finance minister, Godongwana, has called this an attack on the middle class, but he said that he doesn't support this. But, Minister Moron says he doesn't care, because according to him, this has already been legislated by him through his ministerial powers, and therefore he doesn't care what anybody else has to say. But Godongwana says the middle class already carry the majority of the tax base. You can't keep squeezing them. But you see, Minister Moron, who doesn't actually have to care about what things cost, well, he says, I'll do what I want. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly why the whole NHI is a travesty in the first place. You cannot centralize powers in a Minister of Health that may be ideologically captured with him and his deputy, old Crispy Boy. So let's be honest, there's still no credible fiscal plan for the NHI, despite the act being passed. The ANC itself notices that we just can't afford it. All the coalition partners, especially the DA, oppose it. But Minister Moron says he's just going to do his own thing anyway. ANC for you. Zero accountability, zero common sense. And this is why, as I said in my video yesterday, for the Republic to survive, the ANC must die. Anyway, that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And until tomorrow, bye.